What's up, tubes? Fearless here. I just replaced the friction disc on an Ariens 10,000 series tractor. That's a snow throw and also other attachments if you have it, such as a rotary mower. I currently still have the rotary mower on it. Not many people will have that, but it's the same thing. It's the snow throw tractor. It's the 10,000 series, the more difficult one. On a 10,000 series, obviously it's one of the more difficult friction discs to change because it actually requires some disassembly. And I'm making this video because I haven't actually seen a video on YouTube at all explaining this, not even going into explaining this. But first of all, you can download the instructions on friction wheel replacement for this machine as well as the first series. The first series is basically the same. So if you go on Ariens.com and you look up, say you type in 10M6D or one of those models, the instruction manual will have the instructions. So I went ahead and downloaded one of the older manuals that have it, and then I printed it out. But I already did this. It took a couple days. I did the disassembly one day, and then we had a snowstorm, and then I finally got to reassembling it. It's just about reassembled, so I'm going to go ahead and just summarize what I did. Now, it's not really that difficult. You just have to have patience and some tools, which I'll show, and you can persevere. First of all, you would like to jack it up. Now I have the rotary mower attached, so it was easy to jack it up using the mower deck. But if you don't have the mower deck, you can put it right into the service mode for the snowblower, if you have the snowblower bucket on, which most people will. From there, what you do, and what I did was, you remove the bottom cover. Did that. You remove the connecting link from the chain and remove the chain. There's the chain, there's the connecting link. You pop that off and you remove the chain completely. It just pops right out. Alright. Okay, from there, you remove the plate on the left-hand side of the tractor frame. See these plates here? They're put there for a reason. They're the service ports for this. They're on both sides. You're going to have to remove the wheel from the left side anyway, so you can get to that one nice and easy. On this side, you can access the one screw, and then I used one of these bendies to loosen the other screw, and then I just turned that one down. Okay? Once you get those out of the way, okay, you remove the left-hand wheel by removing the 3 bolts from the hub. Now this one has the differential. Not all of them will. Some of them will just have a straight axle. So you just remove the wheel off the straight hub. If you have the differential, you remove it from the differential hub. Some of the older machines don't have a differential. They had that ratcheting wheel. You would just remove it from there. Okay? Most people won't know what I'm talking about. That's first series stuff. It was like auto turn in a day, except it was a failure. And they did away with it, and then they started with using this, which they had this up until like 2010, and then they finally came out with the handle locks on the handlebars to release it. And now they have the auto turn, and I heard the auto turn doesn't work so good because the machines like to veer either to the left or the right. Anyway, that's the new machines. Okay. Alright, once you remove the wheel, okay, you remove the lock nut on the right-hand side of the hex shaft. Up here, this is the hex shaft. There's a bolt on the end of the hex shaft, which you get from this port. You remove it. Once you do that, on this side, you remove these 4 lock nuts, okay, those, and that the whole bearing there comes apart, and then you'll be able to pull this whole hex shaft out of the left-hand side of the tractor. Once you do that, the friction wheel still sits there, okay? It'll still sit because it's hanging from up above, all right? And then what you do is you remove, okay. All right, yeah, so then you remove the hairpin from the fork shaft through the slot on the right-hand rear corner of the frame. This hairpin right here, that pops out, okay? Once that pops out, you hold clutch handle up. I use a pair of these. That holds the clutch handle up, okay? And then this bar way up here comes out the right hand side. So this is the tip of it. That whole bar comes out. Once that bar comes out, the friction disc itself is hanging up in there. Just on a piece of metal, it hangs up in there, and you have to be careful not to bend that. And you remove the whole hub assembly. It comes popping out, okay? Once you do that, and you have the whole hub out, you remove the 5 bolts holding the old friction disc to this piece of cast iron in there, okay? Once they're off, you work the old friction deal up off of this piece. Now this whole thing will be out, like I said, and you remove that, and then you just put the new friction disc on, and then do everything in reverse, alright? You put the whole friction assembly back up in there on the thing it hangs on. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, but right there, see that cotter pin? You have to remove that cotter pin, and then that bar pops, that little, it's like a friction wheel assembly holding bar, that pops out of there, and that will release this whole assembly. I forgot to mention that. It's up in there. It's right up in there. There it is. It goes through that. There's the cotter pin, and then the whole thing will come out. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So then you put the new friction wheel assembly with the new friction disc back up in there. Get that bar, you get it hooked up onto the top up there. Get that little bar hooked back in. Put the cotter pin back in, and use a new cotter pin if you have to. From there, okay, sorry about that. This piece slides back in through the friction wheel assembly. There's a hole that slides back in. You put this clevis pin back in, boom. All right, from there, you slide this whole hex shaft back in and work it through this hole and that one. All right, and then you tighten up the nut that's at the end of this using this service port, okay? Then you tighten these nuts back up. There's 4 of them for that bearing, and you have to actually position this inner piece of the metal. You have to hold it when you're sliding this whole thing through, so this goes in, okay? Tighten that up. Once that's done, you put your chain back on. You gotta work it through there. Use a piece of, I used a hook to get it through down in there. Put the chain hook assembly back together. That's done, okay? Once you do that, close these up, right? Put the wheel back on. Make sure you grease that. I greased everything beforehand before putting everything back together, so everything's nice and greased and oiled. I'm gonna clean the plate and the friction disc of any residual grease. Put the wheel back on, put this cover back on, put this belt back up into position, and then I'm in the middle of replacing the old engine with a new engine, but the engine would be here already. Put the belt back on, put the cover back on, you're done. That's how it's done, okay? So there's, according to this, the instructions, there's basically 13 steps, basically. Alright, and it shows a picture of everything, and that's basically how you do this. Alright, I'm gonna go over this one more time. Alright? So, you remove the bottom cover from the machine. Okay? You remove the connecting link from the chain, and then remove the chain, the connecting link, off. Take the chain off. Remove the left wheel from the hub. Okay? Remove the plate on the left-hand side of the tractor frame. I told you about the plates on each side. You remove the left-hand side one, and the right one has to be removed as well. Okay? You remove the lock nut on the right hand end of the hex shaft. Alright, there's the hex shaft right there. You can't see it, but there's a bolt that you have to remove using the side of the port. Okay, the size of that bolt, I can tell you right now because my tools are still out. The size of that bolt is 3/4. Okay? Once you've done that, you have to remove the 4 lock nuts holding on the bearing flange on the left-hand side of the carrier. The bearing is basically located right about there. You remove those 4 bolts, lock nuts. That's a 3/8. Okay? Once you've done that, you can pull the hex shaft. Well, you pull the hex shaft out of the right-hand bearing. There's a bearing there. You just pull it out of it. And then once you've done that, you and then left-hand bearing out of the frame. So the whole hex shaft will come out of the left-hand side. Okay? From there, you remove the hairpin from the fork shaft through the slot on the right-hand rear corner of the frame. All right, I showed you that. That's up here. That's that pin. You pull it out, and then this whole top shaft pops out, which holds the friction wheel assembly up in there. You pull that out. Once you've done that, okay, there's one more little arm on the friction wheel assembly that comes around and hooks over here. You remove that cotter pin, okay, and then pop that out, and then you can remove the whole friction wheel assembly. It's hooked up on the top. It's just like hooked up there. It's like a hook. Be careful removing that, not to bend it. Remove the whole assembly out. Once you've removed the whole assembly, you can loosen up the 5 bolts holding the old friction wheel to the cast iron round cast metal. Okay, work it up off the assembly, and then put the new one on, tighten it, and then just everything in reverse. Okay, in reverse. Alright, you put the friction wheel assembly back up in there, hook it up on that thing, put the arm back in, put the cotter pin back in, use a new cotter pin if necessary, put that rod back up in there through the friction wheel assembly hole, put the pin back in. Once you've done that, you slide the hex shaft back through the left-hand side of the tractor, bolt that 3/4 bolt tight. Then you've got to tighten the 4 lock nuts that hold that bearing on the left-hand side. Okay, that's done. Make sure everything's lined up nice. Finally, put the chain back on. Use a hook to get it up and around in there. Put the chain link back on. Okay, once you're done with that, close up the ports. Make sure everything's nice and greased. If you haven't done that already, make sure you clean the friction wheel disc and the friction wheel, the plate and the disc and the wheel. Make sure all there's free of grease. Put the cover back on, put the wheel back on, done. That's how you do a 10,000 series. It took me, I'd say 4 hours total. 2 hours to disassemble, 2 hours to reassemble. It wasn't that difficult. It's just, you know, it's time consuming because, like I said, there's a lot of parts. There's a lot of disassembly required in changing the friction disc. But on this one, first gear wasn't working too well anymore. It had to be done, so I did it. Now hopefully first gear will be back, and that'll take care of that. So it was just necessary to do it. It was long overdue, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead and post this. You know, it's this is the best video they have for a 10,000 series right now on YouTube. I mean, they're just not one exists at the moment. In the future, when I get a better camera and I can sit here and film what I do and edit, you know, then I'll be able to make even better videos. But at least this will give people a general idea on how to do it. You know, you follow my instructions in this video, use the friction wheel assembly, disassembly, replacement paperwork, instructions, and you'll be fine. You can do it. Otherwise, you know, you're probably going to be paying a lawnmower shop at least $100 to do this, at least. And that's if they get it right. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to know how to even service these machines. They're so old. This thing's 47 years old, 1971. You know, I mean, some really good professionals out there might know, but a lot of people might not even have a clue. And without this instruction manual, they're not going to have a clue. So you'd have to actually give this to them and say, I want my friction wheel changed, and hope for the best. So, yeah, at least when you do it yourself, you know you're doing it right. All right? So, any questions, comments, leave them below. Otherwise, if this helped, you know, click the like button and subscribe. And thanks for watching. Take care.